Alexandria, Egypt, the city born from the dream of Alexander the Great, destined to be the largest and most advanced megalopolis of all antiquity. It would be home to nearly 1 million people. It was one of the most cosmopolitan cities of the ancient world, a city that housed all the knowledge in the world, all the scientific treatises, all the works of literature, and bold philosophical ideas. A place where writers, artists, and scientists met to discuss and be pioneers of thought. Never before had so many scholars and intellectuals come together in one place, in the first international center for scientific research. Alexandria educated some of the greatest minds ever known: Archimedes, Euclid, Eratosthenes, Pythagoras, Hypatia, Herophilus, and many others. Centuries of knowledge, the seeds of our current culture, were sown in the corridors of the library or the Malsion of Alexandria. It would be the capital of Egypt during the Ptolemaic dynasty, a city that would witness the birth of one of the most famous women in history, Cleopatra. But this megalopolis that gave birth to the legendary library and the famous lighthouse eventually declined and lost its brilliance. The library was destroyed, burned to the ground, along with the wealth of knowledge generated there. A terrible moment when civilization itself stopped in its tracks. Finally, Alexandria became just another city in the Roman Empire in 30 BC. This is the story of the birth, rise, and fall of an illustrious and extraordinary city, the dazzling city of Alexandria.
Welcome to our channel. Discover the captivating episodes of our Origin series, for which I leave a link above, guiding you through the history of mankind in chronological order. Don't miss this incredible journey. Subscribe, like, and share to help us reach even more curious minds. Thank you.
Today, more than 4 million people live in modern Alexandria. Most of them followers of the Islamic faith. The ancient streets are lined with shops and apartments. Located 130 miles northwest of Cairo, Alexandria is Egypt's second largest city and home to its main port. But curiously, the ancient city is nowhere to be found. The modern metropolis has buried ancient Alexandria under concrete and asphalt. Only a 30-meter high column remains in the city as a unique relic of ancient Alexandria. The remains of its ancient magnificence are few. Most were swallowed by the sea due to erosion and earthquakes. Only in the depths of the city and the vast Egyptian desert can evidence of Alexandria's mysterious past still be found. In Alexandria itself, it is very difficult to find traces of the early Ptolemaic age. For a long time, it was believed that nothing remained of that glorious city. Until one day in October 1995, the colossal statue of one of its first kings emerged from the waters of the port. The excitement sparked by this discovery was enormous. This statue revealed what had long been invisible: the existence of the mythical lighthouse of Alexandria, whose entrance it once adorned. 2 years later, the excavation machines working on the construction of a massive highway unexpectedly uncovered an underground world, an entrance to a mysterious, previously unknown city. The necropolis of the city of the dead. But how can these relics be recovered from beneath the countless transformations of this history-saturated city? Today, time is running out. The last traces of Alexander and Cleopatra's city risk disappearing forever. Yet, as the oldest buildings are demolished, new remnants of one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world continue to be uncovered. In the short interval between destruction and reconstruction, a window is offered to the research teams. To reach the Hellenistic layers of the city, archaeologists must excavate more than 12 meters deep. First, the medieval layers will appear, then the Arab, then the Roman, and finally, the layer of the Hellenistic era. They are 12 meters deep, covering 23 centuries of history. The subsoil, compressed for 2 millennia, sometimes gives the impression that it expels its treasures. But how did it all start in this part of the world? A site that would house the most amazing city of the ancient world. 2,300 years ago, this city was born from a dream of Alexander the Great. Alexander was extremely ambitious, and at the age of 24, he had already conquered large territories of the known world. To understand everything about the history of the greatest conqueror of all time, I've linked an excellent documentary above that tells his complete story. After the death of his father Philip II, in 336 BC, Alexander assumed the throne and continued the expansion of the Macedonian Empire, the greatest power in Europe at that time. After bringing the Greek city-states under Macedonian rule and uniting them under a single ruler, Alexander continued his conquest of the mighty Persian Empire. In 334 BC, Alexander began his invasion of the Ionian cities of Asia Minor. He crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia, and took control of key ports in the Aegean. After spending a year securing the conquest of the rest of the Anatolian Peninsula, in the territory of present-day Turkey, Alexander continued his offensive towards the south, capturing the main ports of Asia. Phoenicia and Cyprus easily came under his control. He then conquered Tyre and Gaza. With all these victories to his credit, he was ready to take Egypt, one of the greatest empires the world had ever known. Alexander could not rest easy until he got his hands on what he considered his great prize, one of the most admired and envied countries of all antiquity. At that time, the Alexander's empire occupied 650,000 square kilometers, 5 times the size of present-day Greece. After 2 years of war, Alexander marched into Egypt as far as Memphis. The Egyptians were impatient to see their Persian rulers defeated. They surrendered without a fight and received Alexander with open arms. They offered him the title of Pharaoh. It is here that Alexander began to believe that he really was a living god. To seal his victory, Alexander had to win the hearts and minds of the Egyptians, whose unique religion and culture had been rooted in these lands for more than 3,000 years. Alexander was cunning in choosing to adopt Egyptian customs. The Egyptian people saw him as one of their own. They celebrated Alexander not only as a conqueror or a king, but as a true living god. But even that was not enough for Alexander. Not only did he want to be another in a long line of pharaohs, but he also truly wanted to rule the country, and that meant creating a new city that would bear his name forever. But first, he had to find a suitable location. Alexander founded his future city at the western end of the Nile Delta. Alexander's greatest city, the most beautiful of all. A gigantic vision conceived entirely in the dreams of its founder. He decreed that his city would be the center of learning in the known world, a cultural magnet for talent from all over. This is what Alexandria would become. But Alexander only stayed in Egypt for a few months before embarking on his new conquests in 331 BC, not knowing that he would never see Alexandria again. In the year 323 BC, after bringing the largest empire in history under his power, he contracted a fever that lasted for 12 days. He gradually lost mobility, and a few days after his 33rd birthday, the greatest conqueror ever known died in Babylon. For centuries, Alexander's body rested in the city of Alexandria. But in the 4th century AD, something happened and the tomb vanished. Since then, Alexander's resting place has become one of archaeology's ultimate holy grails. After Alexander's death, the vast kingdom he struggled to build over 12 years was finally divided among more than 20 rulers. The Greek general Ptolemy, Alexander's most trusted general, inherited Egypt. After Alexander's death, Alexandria quickly became the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the most important city in the Greek world. Ptolemy I would be both a king to the Greeks and a pharaoh to the Egyptians, founding a dynasty. This is the beginning of the Ptolemaic dynasty. There were 15 rulers, all of whom bore the name Ptolemy. And they ruled Egypt for almost 300 years during the Hellenistic period, until 30 BC, when Egypt became a Roman province. The dynasty had several queens, including the famous Cleopatra. The Ptolemaic dynasty adopted Egyptian customs from the beginning. It was a constant enemy of the Macedonian Seleucid dynasty, founded by Seleucus, one of Alexander's generals, which focused on the Middle East and maintained the dominance of Greek customs. There, a Greek-speaking Macedonian elite dominated the urban areas. Ptolemy made Alexandria the capital of Egypt. He wanted his city to be not just the capital of a powerful country, but an intellectual center of knowledge and learning. Thanks to Ptolemy, Alexandria immediately began to attract influential scholars from all over the Greek world. Alexandria even supplanted Athens as the most important Greek city in history. General Ptolemy always promoted peaceful coexistence between the Greeks and the indigenous Egyptians. His heirs continued this policy, and thus the Ptolemaic culture became cosmopolitan and dedicated to progress. The reign of the successor of Alexander the Great was full of ostentatious power and the construction of legendary monuments. Ptolemy established the largest and most famous library in the world, the Great Library of Alexandria. At a time when books did not yet exist, it housed up to 700,000 papyrus scrolls and became the first research center in the ancient world. Ptolemy I was a man of iron will and sharp intelligence. He surrounded himself with some of the greatest minds of his time, experts in literature, philosophy, and science. The place chosen to found Alexandria was an unremarkable fishing village, more than 200 kilometers northwest of Cairo. Just a simple fishing village, surrounded by swamps, between a lake and the sea. But then, why did Alexander decide to build the city of his dreams there? He recognized that its true value was its strategic location. He knew that by controlling Pelusium to the east, Memphis to the south, and his crowning glory, Alexandria, to the west, he would create a triangular fortress that would allow him to control the entire delta while giving him access to the Mediterranean. Given its proximity to the sea, the city could always be supplied, trade with foreign powers, and provide shelter from any invasion. On the other hand, Pharos Island fit perfectly into their military defensive strategy. On the periphery, the island was an asset that the enemy would have to attack before they could conquer the mainland. Alexandria sits between two bodies of water. To the north, the Mediterranean Sea. which gives the city its access to the sea. And to the south, Lake Mareotis, now a dry lake, which was the gateway to Africa, Egypt, and the Nile Valley. Alexander wanted to link North Africa with the Mediterranean trade network. The port of Alexandria would become the most important in the entire Mediterranean. Goods would flow through it and bring immense wealth to the city. The southern port of Lake Mareotis was the largest in Alexandria. In the beginning, the city's success stemmed from this port. Lake Mareotis was connected to the Nile, the country's main communication road. This connection served all of Upper and Lower Egypt, enabling trade with all the provinces of Egypt and the rest of Africa. Myrrh, frankincense, spices, and herbs from India, silk from China. Thanks to its ports, among the busiest in the world, the city became the center of Mediterranean trade, positioned at the crossroads of East, West, and Africa. 2,300 years ago, Alexander recognized the military value of the city's design. The wide parallel streets provided him with optimal surveillance of the city while allowing the unobstructed movement of troops. A central corridor ran from the northern Mediterranean port to Lake Mareotis in the south. This thoroughfare served as a direct link for trade and travel between the two ports. The geometric layout of Alexandria marked a revolution in urban planning. The ancient metropolis was a city of vast proportions. Its streets were wider than those of any other city. Compared to ancient Athens or Corinth, Alexandria was like New York compared to Paris or London. Greeks who arrived in Alexandria were awestruck. The city had several main streets. Its most famous artery was the Canopic Way, lined with sumptuous buildings, houses, and temples. At 30 meters wide, it was exceptionally broad even by Greek standards. It remains in the heart of Alexandria to this day. This avenue is 2,300 years old. The megacity was divided into distinct districts, with organized neighborhoods and plots. It formed a rectangle 5 kilometers long and 12 kilometers wide, stretching over a perimeter of 20 kilometers. The urban layout of Alexandria, with its grid pattern, became the model for all new Hellenistic cities, as well as those of the Roman era. At the start of the Roman period, Alexandria was the most populous city of the Hellenistic world. It would not be surpassed until 1st century Rome. But a wealthy city in an open location could attract unwanted attention, so defensive walls were built. Nearly 20 kilometers of walls, the longest in the Western world, enclosed an area of 1,000 hectares, earning admiration throughout the Mediterranean. These walls stood 10 meters high and, more importantly, were remarkably thick, 7 to 8 meters wide. The city's fortified enclosure measured approximately 5.2 kilometers long and 2.2 kilometers wide, with walls reaching nearly 9 meters in height. These formidable ancient walls would later withstand multiple attacks, including an offensive by the king of Syria, Antiochus IV, in 169 BC. He invaded Egypt, conquering almost the entire country, but failed to take Alexandria. Thanks to its walls, Alexandria became a fortress, protected by the sea to the north and by Lake Mareotis to the south. The few access points to the city were narrow and easy to defend. When Alexander reached Pharos, it was still just an island with a small settlement. Egypt's coastline was highly irregular, making it difficult for ships to reach the city. A connection between Pharos and the mainland was necessary. To achieve this, Alexander ordered the construction of a causeway stretching nearly a mile long. The island of Pharos was not entirely separated from the mainland. It was connected by a natural sandbar and an accumulation of sediment carried there by the waves. Alexander's engineers used the sandbank that linked both regions. They reinforced it with embankments and built their causeway on top, later covering its surface with stone pavement. This created a direct connection between the port of Alexandria and the island of Pharos, with a bridge 1,200 meters long and 200 meters wide, forming two port basins for commercial and military ships. They called this dam Heptastadion. Its name comes from Greek measurements, hepta meaning 7, and stadion, a unit of length approximately 180 meters long. Since its construction divided the Great Harbor to the east from the port of Eunostos to the west, it was designed with canals at each end. These openings allowed ships to pass from one port to the other. In addition to creating harbors for commercial and military use, the causeway also served as a primary aqueduct for the island's inhabitants. Its presence also helped shield the island and its ports from strong winds and sea currents. But in Alexandria, the rest of its urban geography was also remarkably advanced for its time. Only a few years after the city's founding in 331 BC, its population had risen to 500,000. However, its architects had anticipated this growth and designed a road system built on a grid that could handle heavy traffic. The city's water supply was also based on an innovative system. Ancient Alexandria was constructed with a vast water distribution network. The metropolis had a hydraulic infrastructure designed from the beginning to support the city's maximum expansion. By 331 BC, 500,000 people lived in Alexandria. It was essential to supply water to the entire population and to provide for the industries and artisan workshops that surrounded them. However, no rivers flowed nearby, so a canal was built to bring water from the Nile to the outskirts of Alexandria. From this canal, aqueducts were constructed, 5 in total, carrying water into the city. Inside the city, a secondary network distributed the water throughout each neighborhood. In the days immediately following the annual flooding of the Nile, water was collected in storage tanks. It was then drawn out using an ingenious system of buckets operated by a water wheel. More than 2,000 cisterns spread throughout the city's districts provided Alexandrians with access to water year-round. It was a masterpiece of urban planning. However, over time, the entrances to these cisterns have been buried, remaining hidden beneath the modern city. In a city filled with magnificent attractions, the Serapeum was considered the most beautiful temple in Alexandria. Located southwest of the city, on a small hill known as the Acropolis, the sanctuary was built during the reign of Ptolemy III, on foundations that dated back to the reign of Ptolemy I. Visitors to the Serapeum ascended 100 steps to reach its courtyard. Libraries were installed along the porticos surrounding the building. Its ceiling and columns were adorned with gold and bronze. Inside, a temple housed the statue of Serapis, dedicated to healing the sick. During Roman times, the Temple of Serapis became a lavish monument, praised for its exceptional beauty. A sacred complex measuring 142 by 55 meters, it was built in a rectangular peristyle design. While the Serapeum was Alexandria's most renowned temple, many others were built throughout the city. Poseidon, the god of the sea, likely had a shrine to the west of the island, as well as on the mainland. During his reign, Ptolemy I sought to merge Egyptian and Hellenic deities into a syncretic divinity called Therapeuti. The cult of Serapis united Greeks and Egyptians, although Egyptians continued to venerate their traditional god, Osiris. In the 3rd century BC, Alexandria witnessed the long-awaited construction of the 7th wonder of the ancient world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. A fire tower standing 135 meters high, it operated day and night, 7 days a week. It was the most legendary monument in Alexandria, the one that would make the island famous throughout the world. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was a source of immense pride for the city's inhabitants. Construction began under the reign of Ptolemy I and lasted for 15 years. When foreigners arrived in Alexandria, they were greeted by the gleaming white marble facade of the lighthouse, towering 135 meters into the sky. It was a symbol of Alexandria's power. The lighthouse was one of the tallest monuments ever built by humankind. Today, nothing remains of the lighthouse, and even its exact location is uncertain. It is believed to have stood where Fort Cape, a 15th century structure, stands today, and that the base of the lighthouse still lies within the fort. Archaeological excavations beneath the sea have uncovered many blocks from the ancient structure. The lighthouse's beam was visible from 50 kilometers away. The beautifully constructed fire tower illuminated the world for 17 centuries. Its square, octagonal, and cylindrical sections became a model for lighthouses built along the Mediterranean coast. How was such an enormous fire kept burning at the top day and night? It remains unclear what type of fuel was used or how it functioned at different times. Other details of how the light operated remain a mystery thousands of years later. The lighthouse's location was no coincidence. It was part of an unprecedented scientific theory. The goal was for the lighthouse to be built along the meridian measured by Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes, one of the legendary directors of the Library of Alexandria, successfully measured the circumference of the Earth. He proposed that the Lighthouse of Alexandria and the Colossus of Rhodes should be constructed along what he called the axis of the world, which later became known as the Meridian of Alexandria. For over 1,500 years, the Lighthouse of Alexandria guided sailors safely into the city's port, until it was ultimately destroyed by an earthquake. What remains is its legend. Like every Greek city, Alexandria had its theater. The Greeks introduced their theatrical traditions through performances that initially took place in the palaces and courtyards of the Ptolemaic princes, until Roman-style theaters began to be built in Egypt. In the theater, the works of contemporary comic and tragic playwrights could be seen. The city's main racecourse was the Legaeon. The Alexandrians were great lovers of horse racing. They were captivated by the fierce rivalries in these races, a battle for glory. The Legaeon was built during Ptolemaic times and was first mentioned by Polybius, who described it as a theater. The Legaeon measured 615 meters in length, with curvature at both ends, and its tracks stretched 568 meters, as indicated by records from the Napoleonic expeditions. Following the Hellenistic model for such structures, it had stepped seating built on a system of parallel walls. During Roman times, it was converted into a circus for chariot races, as evidenced by the addition of a central dividing barrier, or spina, found at the western end of the structure. Its design resembled that of the Hippodrome of Cyrene, or the Circus Maximus, built in Rome during the time of Julius Caesar and Augustus. Records indicate that the Legaeon was used as a stadium for athletic events, and later as a hippodrome. According to Plutarch, the Legaeon was the site of the first confrontation between Octavian and Mark Antony in 30 BCE. An enormous amount of goods and materials flowed through the city daily. The great market of the port was called the Emporium. It was where ship owners exchanged goods. The western port, known as the Port of Eunostos, served as the commercial entry point. The eastern harbor housed the Great Port, where the royal fleet was stationed. Once the city's supply was secured, Alexandria monopolized Egypt's export trade. Food and artisanal goods left Egypt: ceramics, glass, gold rings, and minted coins. In addition to grain exports, there was a luxury trade catering to the elites of the Hellenistic world. Fine linen, glassware, and exotic goods. Spices, gold, silver, and ivory flowed into the city via trade routes from deep within Africa, mainly entering through its third port, located on Lake Mareotis. The most sought-after goods in Alexandria included Syrian pinewood, iron, and marble from the Greek islands, gold from Spain, and exotic fruits from Europe. The city also controlled goods from Arabia and India, which arrived through Egyptian ports along the Red Sea coast. The vast granaries and public warehouses reflected the city's intense commercial activity. Alexandria also thrived as an industrial hub. The city was renowned for its papyrus manufacturing workshops, exquisite glasswork, and the production of perfumes and medicinal compounds, which were also used in funerary practices. The famous royal fleet was based in the capital, which also housed major shipyards. Lacking a strong naval tradition during the Pharaonic era, the Laggid dynasty transformed Egypt into a maritime power. Employing tens of thousands of shipbuilders, the shipyards helped establish the Egyptian fleet as one of the most formidable of the era. The economic policies of the early Ptolemies were best reflected in their abundant, distinctive, and beautifully crafted coinage. The monetary system was unique. In the Hellenistic world, at the heart of Alexandria's wealth was the royal taxation system, which imposed heavy taxes on almost all essential goods: salt, oil, beer, wheat, and flax. As a result, the royal treasury of Alexandria ensured the economic stability of Egypt's administrative regions. Banking was one of the most significant innovations introduced by the Greeks in Egypt. The primary holders of currency were the kings themselves. Members of the dynasty lent money both domestically and abroad. A recently discovered papyrus reveals that foreign currency transactions were carried out by the Royal Bank of Alexandria, which may have also served as the central treasury of the Ptolemies. Royal bankers were, first and foremost, managers of the king's wealth, agents of the crown. Banking operations were concentrated almost entirely in Greek hands. Nearly all the bankers were Greek, as were most of their clients. But ancient Alexandria was not only the most modern city of its time, it was also the center of global knowledge. Intellectual advancements, new philosophies, and groundbreaking sciences flourished, making the city a driving force of progress. And that is what makes Alexandria so extraordinary. When Alexander founded Alexandria, he decreed that his city would be the fountain of knowledge in the known world, a cultural hub attracting the greatest minds from all over. In Alexandria, people of all races converged, and every language was spoken. Even in its vast libraries, papyri were found in every language. Translated from Egyptian to Greek, from Aramaic, or from Hebrew into Greek. The city was an ancient melting pot. Long before Alexander entered Egypt, in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, generations of Greeks had begun grappling with the mysteries of existence. This was the dawn of humanity's understanding of the natural world. Athens, in Greece, became the intellectual epicenter of the ancient Greek world. Conversation and debate were the pastimes of scholars. Public discourse elevated thinkers to celebrity status in the 5th and 4th centuries BC. Men like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, alongside influential legislators of the time, laid the foundation for modern thought. Alexander was educated by Aristotle, a disciple of Plato, who in turn had been a disciple of Socrates. And Ptolemy I also placed immense value on wisdom, believing that knowledge meant power, and his ultimate ambition for Alexandria was to make it the most powerful city in the world, by capturing all existing knowledge within its walls. Ptolemy invited scholars and men of letters from all lands to Alexandria, covering all their expenses indefinitely. Alexandria offered unrivaled intellectual and cultural attractions. Eminent scholars from Athens, Rhodes, and other Greek centers traveled to the city to learn and engage with other free thinkers. Here, men first discovered the size of the world and the number of stars in the sky. There were laboratories, a medical school, and more than 500,000 books in the Great Library. Near the district of the royal palaces and inside the Mouseion stood the most famous library of antiquity. The Library of Alexandria. It was built to house all human knowledge, containing up to 700,000 papyrus scrolls. While much of the collection was purchased at government expense, the library also acquired books through other means. All books owned by travelers arriving in the city were seized, copied for the library, and then returned to their owners, while the original copies were kept in the library's collection. The library endured for more than 6 centuries. Its founding is often associated with the beginning of modern history. More than just a library, it was the world's first research institution. For hundreds of years, Alexandria welcomed dignitaries from all over the world to study within its halls. It was the most important center of learning in the ancient world. The greatest minds of its time taught and conducted research there. Archimedes, Euclid, Eratosthenes, Pythagoras, Hypatia, Herophilus, Callimachus, Hipparchus, Aristarchus, Galen, and many others. The library was part of a larger institution called the Mouseion, or Institution of the Muses. It included rooms dedicated to music, poetry, philosophy, anatomy, and astronomy. The library and Mouseion were likely completed after the death of Ptolemy I, sometime during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, 309 to 246 BCE. Later, he and his Ptolemaic successors continued amassing texts, sending royal agents with vast sums of money to buy as many documents as possible, regardless of subject or author. This strategy proved highly effective, and the library's collection expanded rapidly, eventually requiring the construction of the Serapeum in the 3rd century to house additional scrolls. Both the Mouseion and the library were at the heart of innovative ideas and intellectual expression. The greatest thinkers of antiquity were often well-versed in multiple disciplines, typically aligning with specific schools of thought. The Peripatetics, the Stoics, and the Cynics were among the most well-known schools of the era. It is clear that Alexandria lived up to its role as a city of intellectuals, one that nurtured many great minds, whose impact still resonates in the modern world. The library was renowned throughout antiquity. At its peak, it housed 700,000 scrolls. The Ptolemies went to extraordinary lengths in their pursuit of knowledge. Yet no one at the time could have imagined that not a single one of those scrolls would survive the catastrophic fire of the 3rd century CE, which destroyed everything. The Library of Alexandria was a revolution in both Egyptian and human civilization. It introduced 2 critical innovations in the concept of knowledge. The first was open access to knowledge. Until that time, knowledge had been the exclusive domain of priests and religious leaders in Egyptian and Greek temples. The second was that knowledge was free. Anyone with an idea or theory who wished to investigate it had the right to access prior knowledge and conduct experiments to advance science. This marked the beginning of a cultural revolution, the desire to gather all universal knowledge in one place, turning Alexandria into an unparalleled megacity. The Ptolemies also created a public library, a truly unprecedented achievement in history. There was a genuine desire to share knowledge with the people. The Mouseion, within which the library was located, was commissioned by Ptolemy I to rival the Academy of Athens as an institution dedicated to intellectual pursuits, honoring the 9 inspirational muses. It became a renowned center for philosophy, science, and enlightenment. Scholars from many kingdoms were invited to share their knowledge in literature, science, and geography. The Maushan was designed so that its buildings and grounds would foster free thought, debate, and intellectual discovery. It was an incredible cosmopolitan research center. It had meeting and theater spaces surrounded by a main courtyard. Extensive gardens that were full of exotic plants, brought from all known countries, assisted in the study and supply of herbs and medicines. A zoo allowed the study of animal behavior and physiology. Among the Maushan's many star attractions was its astronomical observatory. It also had an anatomy room where vivisections were performed on the bodies of criminals. It contained residential rooms for scholars, grammarians, and doctors, all of whom had their expenses covered by the kings, who took great pride in this institution. The scholars, in addition to researching and studying, gave lectures and lessons to young people eager to learn. At its height, Alexandria had up to 14,000 students. The city was home to the famous Alexandrian grammarians, who established the rules of rhetoric and grammar, the renowned geographers who mapped the world, and the philosophers whose ideas would later influence entire civilizations. 35 years ago, in 1987, an ambitious cultural project emerged, the reconstruction of the ancient Library of Alexandria, aiming to restore this mythical landmark of antiquity, a World Heritage Site. This occurred approximately 1,600 years after the final disappearance of its great collection of knowledge. To bring this project to life, financial contributions were secured from various European, American, and Arab countries, as well as from the Egyptian government and UNESCO. The budget that year amounted to $230 million. Construction began on May 15, 1995, and was completed on December 31, 1996. On October 16, 2002, the modern Library of Alexandria officially opened its doors. It includes a conference center, a science museum, a planetarium, a research center, and the Calligraphy Institute. Spanning an area of 85,000 square meters, the library houses 8 million books, 100,000 ancient manuscripts, and 10,000 rare books, along with electronic and audiovisual materials and extensive databases. But the great Alexandria, the astonishing metropolis of antiquity, would soon begin a slow and profound decline. For 300 years, it had been the queen of the old capitals, but across the sea, a new power was rising. Rome took control of the entire Mediterranean region. In 31 BC, the Romans conquered the Ptolemaic kingdom, drastically transforming the Greek city, imposing their own architectural style, and introducing Roman culture into Alexandria. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans seized the country by force. The blending of cultures came to an abrupt end. The Romans tolerated no other rulers. They reduced the dazzling metropolis to a provincial city within their empire. After Egypt became part of the Roman Empire in 30 BC, Alexandria, and consequently its library, gradually lost its significance. The Romans established numerous libraries across their vast territories, often incorporating scrolls from Alexandria into these new institutions. The Egyptian city lost prominence to Rome, the empire's capital. Alexandria was no longer the only great library of the Mediterranean. There was the Library of Pergamon, its long-standing rival, as well as the Library of Antioch, the Library of Celsus, the Villa of the Papyri in Pompeii, the Oppian Library, the Imperial Library of Constantinople, and various private collections scattered across the region. The nature of the library changed. The original ambition of the first Ptolemies, to collect all knowledge, including that of non-Greek civilizations such as the Egyptians and Jews, was abandoned. The confrontation between Julius Caesar and the Alexandrians in 48 BC marked the beginning of the library's decline. Documents and storage facilities were burned during the conflict, and the fire spread to the library. The Great Library was not completely destroyed. It was later rebuilt, but successive civil wars led to further losses of its prized collection. By the 3rd century AD, intellectual activity at the library had declined so much that it was rarely mentioned. By then, scholars had moved on, teaching and researching at other institutions. Although the exact date of its final destruction is uncertain, historians believe that what remained of the library was likely lost in 272 AD during Emperor Aurelian's battle against Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, or during the siege of Alexandria by Diocletian in 297 AD. The last remnants of the library probably disappeared, along with the Malsion in 391 AD, when Archbishop Theophilus, following the orders of the Roman Emperor, destroyed all pagan temples. The Serapeum, which had functioned as both a library and temple for centuries, was one of the last structures to survive. Although the Library of Alexandria was lost, the tradition of academic institutions continued in the ancient world. Undoubtedly, the disappearance of the Library of Alexandria is one of history's most symbolic cultural tragedies, comparable only to the burning of books during the sack of Constantinople by the Crusaders in 1204, or the infamous book burnings of 1933 at Berlin's Bebelplatz, orchestrated by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Not to mention the destruction of the Baghdad Library in 2003, as US troops stood by, indifferent. Alexandria would fade away as its emblematic lighthouse crumbled. Its slow decline would accelerate when Cairo was designated the new capital of Ottoman Egypt. Alexandria's golden age under Ptolemaic rule lasted only 300 years. It was the Ptolemies who turned Alexander the Great's vision into reality. They made Alexandria the cultural heart of the ancient world and a beacon of knowledge and science. Alexandria had, in less than a century, become the largest city in the Mediterranean and the most modern of antiquity. It forged its own identity with flawless infrastructure. For the beauty of its layout, its grand avenues, its temples and harbors, its unparalleled buildings, and its extraordinary technological advancements, Alexandria was far ahead of its time. The monumental achievements of its rulers remain shrouded in mystery and will continue to fuel our imaginations for millennia to come.
Before we continue, we would like to invite you to become a member of the channel. As a member, you will enjoy exclusive content and support the creation of our documentaries. In addition, you can show your support by sending a super thanks through the link found under each video. As usual, if you appreciate our content, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share our videos. Each action is important and aids in our growth. Thanks.